Hello, my name's Frank Renton. Welcome to Listen to the Band. Reaching the age of 75 is pretty good in any circumstances. For a brass band these days, it's well nigh miraculous. So, happy birthday, the Fairey Band. The Beaufighters, the signature march of the Fairey Band, written for them by Maurice Johnston. The band was conjured into life by the management and workers of the Fairey Aviation Factory in Stockport in 1937, And the Fairey Band, as they are now known, have been one of the most consistently successful bands in the business for the whole of their 75 years, especially in the early years, under the inspired leadership of Harry Mortimer. In the early days, virtually everyone in the band worked at the factory, a significant advantage. I asked cornetist Brian Taylor and conductor Mark Peacock how that all worked.
I'm very fortunate, really, with that, because jobs are very scarce these days, as it must be hard for youngsters getting jobs. But in them days, there was opportunities for apprenticeships. And I was given that chance, and I went to the factory. I think I'd just turned 16, started my apprenticeship. But before that, I had an audition to get in the band. I had to have an audition to get in the band.
But you were being taught by Ray Peacock.
I was, yeah.
He was your dad?
Yeah.
Right.
I used to go once a week up to Ray's house and have a lesson. Come home in tears for being shouted at.
So your family's been inextricably involved with the band for years, Mark.
From ever since I was born, 1970, my dad was already at Fairey's then. I think Philip McCann was on top man. My dad was a bumper up. And then I've always grown up with Fairey Band. That was all I wanted to do, was in my banding career, was to play for Fairey's, which I had the opportunity to do in the 90s. Great band then. And now to be conducting them is just dream come true, you know. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
But of course, for Brian Taylor, all those years ago, there was still the matter of the band audition to get through. And he had to impress one of the great cornet legends of the day, the band's solo cornet player, Norman Ashcroft.
I think Norman must go down in my books as one of the finest players I've ever heard. Really was. He worked so hard at what he did. And he was so eccentric as well. I mean, there was many occasions that you'd be travelling on a job. It could have been in the summertime. And he'd be on the coach with his hat on, his gloves on, a big overcoat, and he'd sit there buzzing all the way to the job. He really was a strange sort of guy to get to know.
Now, you must have been asked to go to all sorts of other bands as Fairey's have gone up and down. I know that I invited you at least twice to come and join me in other bands, and you never have. You've always said, no, my band's the Fairey Band, and that's where I'm staying.
Yeah, see, yeah, I remember that. I think it's just something you grow into, you get settled. Well, I know I've got settled with the band. It's so comforting, really. There's no, you're with the same people every day. It's just like home, if you like. It's that comforting.
Brian Taylor, one of the great solo cornet players himself, and he recorded this especially for our celebratory programme. Just a Closer Walk with Thee, featuring Brian Taylor. A great contemporary success for their band has been the collaboration in the acid brass concerts and recordings, and I asked Brian and Mark if the effects of that were still felt.
Very much so. We've got a few events lined up this year, and we've been used on various adverts and films, and the royalties still come in for that every so often. And they're great events to do. Really are great events to do, and it did give Fairies a boost just as much as Brassstoff did for Grimethorpe. And that's still very successful and a big part of our calendar.
It's amazing, isn't it, that the brass bands could suddenly go into that culture and become instantly famous. It wasn't something that took a long time. It was like overnight, wasn't it?
It was fantastic, wasn't it, Brian?
Very strange thing. Yeah, it was.
You were both part of it as players, right?
Yeah, we were the very first time that Jeremy Della came up, and we thought, what is this? What is all this about?
We didn't think it'd work at all, really. We never had no idea that there'd be people out there wanting to listen to this sort of brass band who didn't know anything about brass music or anything like that, brass bands, what they could do. But we went on a few of these gigs, and we was quite surprised, actually, that there was people at the front dancing. I thought, what's all that about?
Trying to get on the stage.
This doesn't happen at normal concerts.
I've heard about Brian.
Yeah. So it was bizarre.
It was an eye-opener, and
really
it's opened so many doors for us at Fairies. I mean, we've been on Jeremy Della, the architect of the idea. There was a programme on BBC about him this year.
I saw it.
Which we featured on. And it's just great fun to do. When we've got an acid job, it's great. Oh, I can't wait
good
for this.
fun.
It's a release from the test pieces, and it's a different audience.
Cubic from the acid brass music arranged for the band by Rodney Newton. This is Listen to the Band on BBC Radio 2, and I'm Frank Renton, celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Fairey Band. It was on this day 75 years ago in 1937 that the supremely talented George Gershwin died at the ridiculously early age of 38. so it seems fitting that we should include in this other celebration music from his most famous work. Bess You Is My Woman Now, from Porgy and Bess. Tell me, has the fact that in this northwest of England we have the Royal Northern College of Music and Salford University, and they're hoovering up players from all over the country and they're all coming here, has that been to you a great help? Because you say the band's younger, and I know lots of them are either students or just post-grad students, aren't they?
Definitely. It has been a massive boost for the band over the last few years, that we have picked up some of the top quality youngsters that are at these establishments, and have helped to make Fairies get back Fairies to the top of the banding tree and make a name for themselves and help take Fairey back to the top, without a doubt.
But there is a difference, isn't there, Brian? In the old days when everybody worked,
Yes.
and it was this cohesive team. There isn't that same feeling of togetherness and cohesion now that there used to
right.
be.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started work there, majority of the band worked at the factory in different jobs. There were labourers, there were machinists, draftsmen, foremen. They all involved with the band. Once the work was finished, you was in the band room. Everybody was on an equal again. So it was a real good friendship, I think we had there.
Rehearsals used to start about 5:30.
Yeah, we used to start rehearsals about 5:30, straight after work. So and we finished at 7:30, and the rest of the night was okay. You was free. It didn't tie up your night, your evenings. You could go on and do other things. If you wanted to conduct a band, you had time to do things. I mean, when I first started there, I think there's about 3 of us young people. There were me, Alan Witchley, and Sean Crowthen. We were all at the factory. And we was all working outside of each other in the apprentice school. Well, that was quite fun. Out of each other's pockets every day. Nobody had any money, but it was fun. Life was fun. The band was all we thought about. Us 3 young ones were thrown in the middle of all these middle-aged people, really, guys who played the instruments. No women, of course, then.
But now you take a completely different...
Well, this is a problem now. I'm ending up being one of the older ones.
But you're now a teacher. You left and went back to university and then got your teaching diplomas, and you now teach music.
Yes, I'm teaching now in schools and at university level.
And Mark, you played in the band, your dad played in the band.
My brother played
played in the band.
And Brian's nephew, my cousin, Matthew Taylor, he's in the band.
Yeah.
It's a real Peacock-Taylor family tradition, I think, for Fairies. We've always aimed for that.
Do you have to be related to get an audition now?
It helps.
We'll probably audition you, Frank, but don't worry about it. We'll get you in, don't you?
I think I'm a bit old for an apprenticeship at Fairey. So, Mark, I mean, it's a great band to conduct. They're an amazingly different group of young people. It's not like going into the old-fashioned band rooms anymore. They work very quickly, don't they?
They do. They can get through the new pieces very, very quickly. The more technically challenging pieces, the techniques are fantastic. The ranges of the players, and they don't seem to struggle like
they don't.
would have done 20, 30 years ago on these pieces. And they soak it up, and they enthuse them, and they're living and breathing, as Brian said before, just as he was living and breathing it at Fairies in bygone days. They're still living and breathing it every day, but the Royal Northern College of Music or Salford University, and it's still their reason for being a musician.
What magnificent music. The last of our celebrations tonight. The finale from the ballet Checkmate by Arthur Bliss, first performed in Paris in 1937. So sharing this 75th anniversary with the Fairey Band. And don't forget you can hear this special programme again by going to the website. Next week, I have a programme of special performances on disc, a few days before we celebrate the 125th anniversary of the British Bandsman magazine, and I hope that you can join me. From producer Terry Carter and me, Frank Renton, thanks for listening and bye now.